And as you asked earlier, what did he give away to get it? Listen to how Matt Gaetz described what the House is going to be like, perhaps under these new rules, under the deal that Kevin McCarthy landed with them.
The construct of these rules concessions functionally turn the speakership into a ceremonial position. Matter of fact, if my colleagues get what they want from McCarthy, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus will actually be more important than the Speaker of the House. He will have to live the entirety of his speakership in a straitjacket constructed by these rules that we're working on now.
I mean, wow, is he right?
I mean, he's not wrong there. And speaking to those concessions, I mean, what really makes Kevin McCarthy so much less powerful than other speakers in the past is that right now he has a conference, a very narrow majority with many members who are willing to just basically push a vote of no confidence on him at any turn. Any sort of bad move that Kevin McCarthy or that Speaker Kevin McCarthy makes, whether it's policy, House rules, procedure, tactics, politics, as we saw earlier this week as well, is going to put him in that position of being put up for a referendum because of that motion to vacate measure where any one member can call for that vote to Speaker. So we could see this exercise over and over again. And I imagine Kevin McCarthy, while he is a fighter, he is a survivor, he's going to have to be looking over his shoulder almost every morning when he wakes up to figure out, how could I be ousted today?
And that man, Matt Gaetz, who you just saw on your screen, is going to be the person trying to be front and center on all of this.
How do you expect to govern this way if it has been taking this long to get the conference united?
See, this is the great part. Because it took this long, now we learned how to govern. So now we'll be able to get the job done.
Now we've learned now we learn how hard it's going to be to get all of this done. I am fascinated by this, Brez, but tomorrow we're going to be talking about rules. And the rules are critically important here, and this is not a fight that is over.
No, and it's not a fight over. There's two things, or a couple of things happening. They're going to vote on the actual rules package tomorrow. That's going to pass. There's only one member who's opposed, a Republican who's opposed, Tony Gonzalez of Texas. That's going to pass. But the thing we haven't seen, there's a document circulating around, a couple pages, like 3-page document, that's got some unwritten rules that they're talking about, which is like reducing spending to 2022 levels, which would be big cuts in government spending. And this was one of the problems that McCarthy faced, is moderates were upset about.
So this is like not in the rules package, but it's like a secret document that's
floating around.
They're
not actually even letting people have copies of it. So,
it tells you how damaging it would be for them if it got out.
Yeah, and so I mean, there's going to be they're going to try and pass the rules package. They'll get that done, and then they're going to launch into some votes. They think that will help them. There'll be abortion votes. There'll be a crime vote. But we're going to see a fight pretty soon on immigration. That's going to happen in the House, and that's going to be the first flashpoint. And I think he's going to have a problem there. McCarthy's going to have a problem there.
As you pointed out, some of the concessions that we are learning that McCarthy made include this idea that they can cap spending at fiscal year 22 levels, which would be a cut to defense spending. There is the motion to vacate, which would allow anyone to call a vote to get rid of the speaker at any moment, basically. Putting some of these hardliners on key committees, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, no more omnibus spending deals. These are potentially pretty significant concessions, which really raise the question about what is going to happen to the institution over the next 2 years.
Well, you played the clip of Gaetz calling this a straitjacket. So that list is really the straitjacket that he's trying to describe. Basically, it ties the hands in some of these critically, potentially crisis-level situations of the leadership to try and solve problems fast, which is what, honestly, omnibus spending bills have become in recent years. That's not to say it's not a problem. Congress is not supposed to govern this way. In fact, I think there's one of the youngest members of Congress, the first time since Congress passed all of its appropriations bills on time was the year he was born or the year before he was born, something like that, right? So this is how we've operated for a long time. But I think that we've learned how to govern sticks in my head because this has been the reality inside the Republican conference since well before Kevin McCarthy got the gavel, right? This was why John Boehner resigned. This is ultimately why Paul Ryan decided to throw in the towel. This has been an ungovernable conference. This group of people have bedeviled anyone who's actually tried to run the country. And this was a much more prolonged version of, I think, the example that was set that means we're going to be going from crisis to crisis. We're going to face potentially a government shutdown. When we hit the debt ceiling, we potentially face the very real possibility of a default. It seems like a lot of these members do not care about that, and there are very real-world consequences, and it's going to layer right over the top of a very contentious presidential campaign.
Maybe they don't care. Some of them actually want to take it all the way to the brink. And then on top of that, there's something else that McCarthy agreed to. This is a committee that would investigate the investigators, investigate the FBI and the DOJ, people who, by the way, are investigating some of these sitting members of Congress. This is extraordinary. It also would kind of dabble in some of this sort of social media censorship world. McCarthy pretty much immediately said, yes, we're going to do that. What is that going to do?
Well, we'll see what it does, and they wanted funding for that committee. So, I mean, the reality is all of that will be playing out here with many investigations. The Hunter Biden investigation is something that really was, one of the reasons that Republicans won. I mean, every Republican voter I talked to last year was very concerned about this, and the Afghanistan pullout, China, the origins of a COVID. There is some real oversight and investigations here. This investigating the investigators, we'll see. I mean, that is something that Jim Jordan and others wanted. But at the end of the day here, one thing we're also not talking about, we can't forget, the Senate is controlled by Democrats.
Yeah. Right.
So and the White House, for sure. So never mind what gets out of the House. I mean, most of the stuff is dead on arrival. So, but one thing is different. Some Democrats will be in the House will vote for some of these things. So that will be a margin, a help for Kevin McCarthy here on the spending things and other things. Some moderate Democrats will help it.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you tell Democrats, let's cap defense spending at lower levels, some of them will be like, sure, we need to do that. So that's one of the things. But it strikes me also that the fallout from all of this is that McCarthy has basically single-handedly empowered these really fringe characters in the Republican Party. You're talking about people like Paul Gosar and Scott Perry. Paul Gosar, who spoke at a white supremacist conference. Scott Perry, who is basically being subpoenaed over his involvement in the January 6th stuff. Jim Jordan. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a member of leadership, as she describes herself now. Right. I mean, that's really extraordinary and maybe a long-lasting consequence of all of this.
Right. Because of the narrow majority that House Republicans won in November, Kevin McCarthy is so hamstrung by these very, it's hard to call them conservatives. They're just very hardline far-right people and a very, very small minority of the conference where most of the conference or a majority of the conference do want to actually unify and govern and get some stuff done and get some of the red meat stuff out there. But I am just, when Jeff was talking, I was thinking about what former Speaker John Boehner used to say back when he was in charge. He would try to temper expectations against a Democratic Senate and a Democratic White House. Back then, he said we control, what was it, 1/2 of 1/3 of government to try to illustrate how little they could actually get accomplished because of the opposition in the Senate and the White House. How is Speaker McCarthy going to temper those expectations against these House Republicans who have set a pretty high bar for him? That'd be one dynamic to watch.
Yeah, they're not going to be unilaterally passing any spending bills or dealing with the debt ceiling. They have to deal with the other half of 2/3 of government on that one.